A winter night in 1936, a column of flame rose over South London high enough to be seen from the coast, 30 miles south. The biggest building in the world was burning, and nobody who watched it from the hills could remember a brighter sky at midnight. 990,000 square feet of glass and iron, 4 times the floor area of St. Peter's Basilica, collapsing into the hill in 6 hours. 293,000 panes melting into puddles on the terraces. The future does not die because it was wrong. It dies because nobody will pay to keep it standing. The building had stood for 85 years on that hill, and by the night it burned, it had been losing money for 50 of them. And the man who designed it had never designed a building in his life. His name was Joseph Paxton. He was the head gardener for the Duke of Devonshire at Chatsworth, and his specialty was greenhouses, sheets of glass laid over iron ribs, the kind of structure a working estate could afford to build cheap and fast. In June of 1850, the committee planning Britain's Great Exhibition had rejected 245 architectural submissions. Every one of them was too expensive, too slow, or too permanent for a building that needed to come down again in a year. Paxton sketched his proposal on a piece of pink blotting paper during a railway board meeting in Derby. 9 days later, it was a formal plan. He had never trained as an architect. He had never put his name on a building before this one. The committee, out of time and out of options, picked the gardener. Now they had 9 months to put up the largest building on earth. 990,000 square feet, 4,500 tons of cast iron, 293,655 panes of glass. 9 months from first stake to opening day. None of it would have been possible on site. Paxton's real invention was not the building, it was a kit. Standardized iron columns, standardized girders, standardized sash bars, all of them poured in foundries in Birmingham, hauled by rail to Hyde Park, and bolted together by crews of 80 men working a single bay at a time. A pane of glass went in every minute of every working hour for the better part of a year. Every airport you have ever walked through, every warehouse, every factory floor, still uses Paxton's system. It is the construction logic that would build the rest of the century: speed, scale, prefabrication. And it almost didn't get built at all. Parliament nearly killed the project. Hyde Park was sacred ground, and the chosen site held a row of mature elm trees the public refused to cut down. The Times called the proposal a glass monstrosity and predicted it would shatter in the first hailstorm. Colonel Charles Sibthorpe, the loudest opponent in the Commons, prayed publicly for hail. The vote to authorize the building passed by a narrow margin, and only after Paxton agreed to a condition that should have been impossible. He would not cut the trees. He would build the building around them, raise the central transept into a barrel-vaulted nave 108 feet tall, and enclose the elms inside the glass. Live trees, with birds in them, stood under the roof for the full run of the exhibition. When the doors opened on the 1st of May, 1851, 6 million people came. 6 million visitors in 5 months. A third of the population of Britain walked through Paxton's glass. What they saw, packed into a single room a third of a mile long, was the entire industrial future of the 19th century. Stationary steam engines running at full pressure, telegraph machines clicking out messages in real time, hydraulic presses, locomotives, agricultural machinery, the Koh-i-Noor diamond on a velvet cushion, and goods catalogued from every continent the empire could reach. The exhibition closed in October with a surplus of £186,000. That surplus founded the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Science Museum, and the Natural History Museum, institutions that have outlived the building by 90 years and counting. The Crystal Palace was profitable on a scale nothing of its kind had ever been, and then they took it apart. Between 1852 and 1854, the building was disassembled bay by bay, loaded onto rail wagons, and moved 9 miles south to Sydenham Hill. There it was reassembled larger than before, a higher central nave, 2 new water towers designed by Brunel, 200 acres of pleasure gardens, terraces, fountains pumping more water per minute than the City of London used in an hour. Concerts, exhibitions, the first life-size sculpted dinosaurs ever made, set in a park at the foot of the hill where they still are today. For 10 more years the palace turned a profit. Then the arithmetic of the building itself caught up with the people who owned it. A greenhouse is glass laid over iron, glass leaks, iron rusts, and heating 990,000 square feet through a London winter cost more every year than any gate could possibly take in. From the 1880s onward, every year cost more to keep the palace open than the public would pay to come through the doors. The roof leaked, panes cracked and were replaced with cheaper ones, then not replaced at all. Paint peeled off the iron in sheets. The company that owned it stopped paying dividends in the 1890s and went into receivership in 1909. A public trust bought it out of bankruptcy to keep it standing, and the trust spent the next 27 years losing money on it. During the First World War, the Royal Navy commandeered it as a training depot and called it HMS Crystal Palace. Sailors slept in the transept under the leaking glass. The arithmetic was simple and unsentimental, heating bill versus ticket revenue every winter, every year. On the night of November 30th, 1936, someone smelled smoke. Started in a women's lavatory in the staff quarters at around 7 in the evening. A small fire, the kind a watchman should have been able to put out with a bucket. Within 20 minutes it had reached the wooden floorboards under the central transept. Within an hour the transept was an open furnace. The fire pulled air up through the building's own ventilation slots and accelerated. 89 fire engines came from across London. 381 firefighters worked the hill through the night. The light was visible from Brighton, 60 miles to the south. Winston Churchill, watching from the far side of the Thames, said quietly to the people standing near him, "This is the end of an age." By 1 in the morning the roof was gone. The cause of the fire was never determined. There was no insurance worth speaking of. There was no money to rebuild. There was barely a conversation. The site sits empty today. 90 years on, nothing has been built on the hill. The foundations are still there in the grass, 2 great rectangles of broken concrete and the stumps of the iron columns where Paxton's bays were bolted down. The terraces are intact. The sphinxes are still at the top of the steps. Brunel's water towers came down in the war because the Air Ministry thought they were too useful a navigational landmark for German bombers. The dinosaurs are still in the park at the foot of the hill, where the children climb on them on weekends. Various proposals have been floated to rebuild in the 1950s, the 1970s, again in 2013, when a Chinese developer offered £500 million and walked away inside 2 years. The view from the top is one of the best in London. There is nothing on it. The lesson is older than the palace and bigger than London. The hill at Sydenham, nothing now stands where the Crystal Palace stood. The foundations are in the grass, the sphinxes are weathered, the terraces hold no building. 4 times the floor area of St. Peter's Basilica, 90 years on the ridge, 6 hours of fire, and 90 more years of quiet. The hill stayed empty. This is the obituary of the future they meant to keep. Beautiful infrastructure, ambitious beyond its decade, profitable for a generation, expensive forever, and demolished or burned the moment the maintenance bill came due, and nobody wanted to pay it. Penn Station, sold to clear a railroad's debt. The Singer Building, the tallest demolition in history at the time, taken down for an insurance company's office floor. Hudson Terminal traded away for the World Trade Center site. The Crystal Palace, the building that opened the industrial future to 6 million people in 1851, abandoned by its trust, burned in 1936, never replaced. For more big stories told small, subscribe. More chapters coming.